Tonight on Garbage Time Fantasy Football, CeeDee Lamb finally broke out, and I beat Ron this weekend. It's time for Garbage Time. Guys, welcome into Garbage Time Fantasy Football. Tonight we are running with me, Joe, and Ryan. How are you doing tonight, Ryan?
Not too bad. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty damn good. Can I just say it was a really weird week in fantasy football?
There were definitely some surprises, and I don't know if you noticed some high-scoring defenses this week.
You want to lay those out for us?
Just off the top of my head, I know the Rams had a good showing, the Cardinals had a good showing, the Steelers had a good showing. I mean, I think they were all 20 points plus.
Yeah, thank God for me playing the Cardinals, because in that matchup against Ron, if I didn't have that defense, I seem to have talked shit the entire week, and I would have been eating crow tonight, but I'm not. So
Steelers as well. The Steelers, I think, put up 20, which was surprising.
Well, to be fair, that's because they were playing against Geno Smith and the best safety in the world, allegedly, Jamal Adams, right? So we can kind of get over that. And is there anything else you want to add into that, Ryan, before we get into the news? Anything you want to brag about?
Well, I'm not. I shouldn't even say it because it looks like I'm gonna beat Kemp this week, continue my undefeated streak of 6-0, which I'm pretty sure that's the number of wins I got all last season. So I'll take it.
Yeah, we just have a comment down here from one of the other hosts that happens to be at work right now, probably should be working. He says, talk about how the Giants suck. Don't worry about that, Ron. We know how much the Giants suck. We will get into a complete game recap of that. So don't worry. You will get a complete turn about that. But first, obviously, we have to get into the news, right, Ryan?
Absolutely.
Before we do that, guys, though, I just want to make sure you can find us on Spotify, Google, Apple, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Amazon, and www.garbagetimeff.com. Join the heckling fandom, like, subscribe, and leave reviews anywhere you find us, guys. So let's get into the fantasy football news because, my God, this actually is a fantasy football show.
News updates.
All right, Ryan. So there was a really weird rumor floating around since last weekend, but we didn't really touch on this. And now that Geno Smith really sucked it up for Seattle and Pittsburgh happened to win that game, there's rumors out there saying that Cam Newton actually talked to the Seahawks. You think there's any chance he actually ends up on this team?
I could see it. I mean, I think it's going to come down to how well they think Russell Wilson is actually progressing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what the Seahawks cap space is like, but I also don't think Cam Newton's a player that's going to try to get the big money contract. So they might be able to get him on their team relatively cheap.
I think so too, but the unfortunate side effect of this is I honestly think it downgrades Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf both even farther than they already have with Geno Smith playing. So, man, they just got to hope Russell Wilson.
Carson.
Yeah, it's just a bad situation. Yeah. Speaking of Alex Collins, we'll just glide over that because I don't think there's too much to really evaluate because he's not on that team yet right now. Alex Collins hurt his hip and glute, so yes, his ass hurts. But he's expected to play this weekend against the Saints. Do you see him being the bell cow again if he actually gets a start and Carson's still out?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think that's probably their best bet. I'm working on pulling up that game right now because I just want to kind of see the stats quick. I mean, 20 carries for 100 yards and a touchdown. That's a solid amount of work.
Yeah, no kidding. Honestly, if you got him late on waivers last week, which was a good chance because a lot of teams anticipated Carson was going to be playing, and then he was late added to the IR, you were absolutely thrilled if you actually put him in your lineup. We were debating up until Sunday to actually play him in our Megalo Bowl. We didn't end up doing that, and we got away with the victory still. But it'll be in strong consideration if he actually does play this week, regardless of the energy, because I think they're going to be looking to run the ball and control the clock because they do not trust Geno Smith going forward.
So on that note, I mean, I know you mentioned if Cam Newton comes in, it hurts the wide receivers, but how do you feel about the wide receivers even if Geno Smith keeps it? I mean, pretty pedestrian outings by pretty much all the receivers on that team.
So with DK Metcalf, he's obviously a big-bodied wide receiver, and with that, he almost kind of looks like a prototypical tight end, which is the safety blanket of all quarterbacks, as we know. So Geno Smith's going to look to push the ball to him. Unfortunately, Geno Smith's not the most accurate quarterback in the world, so I only see him really being a wide receiver number 2. And scary to say, Tyler Lockett is actually benchable, I think, while Geno Smith plays. I don't see him actually having any of those boom games, and we saw that this weekend. It's very hard to bench him just because of the name, but I just don't feel very confident in Tyler Lockett right now.
Well, yeah, because all of typically the big Tyler Lockett plays are those deep balls that are way downfield, and I don't think you're going to see those from Geno. And like you said, DK Metcalf led the team. Like you said, he's that big body guy. And then right behind him was the tight end. So really, it's going to be those two.
Yeah, just a pretty shitty time. In other news, too, so Calvin Ridley was out before the bye week with a personal matter. He's finally back on the team, so there was no injury issues with him here. Do you think he's going to come back full strength, and do you foresee him having a better season going forward now?
That's tough. I mean, he hasn't had a great season even when he was playing. I don't know what the personal issues were. I know that they got one more game, then they're heading into the bye week, and he scored over 15 points twice. So where you took him, you're probably not getting what you were hoping for. I don't remember what his ADP was, but you got to hope so. I mean, he
sure as hell isn't a top 5 wide receiver like we were thinking with him.
No, I mean, he is going up against the Jets this week, so that does help. I mean, I think he's definitely a starter if you have him on your team.
That is incorrect. He is not going up against the Jets. We are not playing the Atlanta Falcons.
Oh, yeah.
That would have been 2 weeks ago, so obviously your time schedule's back on. You might want to look up who they're actually playing this week, Ron Seymour. Be prepared for the show. Oh, boy.
So who are they playing?
I actually haven't looked at the schedule this early in the week.
They're going
considering this is a recap show,
Miami.
We're getting a little
they're
bit
facing Miami. They had a bye week for week 6. Calvin Ridley will be going up against Miami.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't really be too concerned about that. Miami's defense has really been a letdown this season, and unless Xavier Howard's back, they're not going to be covering him with him anyway. So even if that is the case, they'll look to move Calvin Ridley around, I think, and he'll potentially still have a good game. If he comes back, you obviously have to start him, and you don't have much of a choice there.
Okay, my fault, guys. I didn't realize the Falcons just played the Jets. Okay, I didn't mess up that much, Ron. But yeah, the Falcons just played the Jets. They're going into a bye week, so I see him being back to full ability week 7.
Yes, Ron, and don't worry, your Giants still suck, and like I said, we'll get to that. That's probably why you're depressed. You're probably not even really working. You just decided to talk shit on this, and you're probably not going to show up all week. All right, anyway, into more news. Antonio Gibson is undergoing an MRI on his shin, and the timetable is completely unknown for when he's going to come back. That is by far going to make McKissic the top waiver priority this week. While he was out and playing in Kansas City, he got passing work, he got rushing work, and he looked pretty good. What are your thoughts on both of these players going forward?
Yeah, McKissic has been looking good. I mean, he had a pretty strong showing this week, if I remember correctly. And he's already pretty right behind Antonio Gibson in points. I mean, Antonio Gibson's only ranked number 16, which is far lower than some of us ranked him, I think. And McKissic is right behind him at 23. So it's a tough season for those that took Gibson early. I did take him in one league pretty early, and it has not panned out.
At least in the immediate future, not really knowing what this injury is. I see McKissic as being a high upside running back 2 right now, with potentially even more upside, especially if Washington gets behind in these games, because he does have that passing ability too. So I think he's an excellent option going forward and should be obviously your top waiver priority, especially if you need running backs going into this. So into what were we saying?
Yeah, and on that, I'm seeing that. So McKissic is only rostered in 42% of all Yahoo leagues and only 46% of all ESPN leagues. So in over half of fantasy football leagues, he should be available.
And if you're still using Yahoo, there's something wrong. You need to get off that platform because there's much better platforms such as ESPN or Sleeper. Hell, even Sleeper's a lot better than ESPN. So do the Sleeper app. I would highly suggest it. It really motivates trades, and it is a very fun, evolving platform to actually get in. And some more fun news here, too. The Panthers coach, Matt Rule, says he'd like to establish the run more, which I think is really good news for Chuba Hubbard going forward, who's actually looking like a pretty confident running back, I think.
Yeah, I think he put up 14 or 15 points this week. Looks pretty good. He'll be a solid RB2 on your team. I think even with this change in in game planning that the coach is talking, I think he's still an RB2.
Yeah.
Super sucky for any Christian McCaffrey owners. I think
Ron Seymour, who traded him away.
Yeah, I think this is gonna be a season-long thing of him being in and then him being out. So it's gonna be a rocky season for a little bit if for Christian McCaffrey owners.
Yeah, I think you're right there too. Speaking of running backs that are in dire straits right now, we thought Kareem Hunt this past Sunday went down with a season-ending injury. Something did work to him. He's got them gummy bear joints because he's only expected to miss a few weeks, but there's potential for him to still end up on IR, which is going to really open up waiver options for Dearness Johnson and Dimitri Felton from the Browns, which are two running back options. What do you feel about this injury? How does Chubb fit into this? And do you like any of these players going forward?
It's tough because I think you pointed out last week, Chubb played better typically when Hunt was also in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be interesting how the absence of Hunt impacts Nick Chubb's fantasy value. I do like at least one of those backups is probably worth a pickup, especially if you have Nick Chubb on your team.
Mm-hmm.
The Kareem Hunt owner or the Kareem Hunt owners. I mean, I'm assuming they're going to be dying for people. So I think there's some value there, but I'm curious to see how Nick Chubb does without Hunt.
Okay, and in an interesting statistic that I was able to pull up from this past Sunday, Rashad Bateman ran 66.6% of Lamar Jackson's route this weekend, so while he was passing. Do you like him as an option going forward, and is he worth the bench spot?
I say absolutely, especially if they're going to be integrating him into the offense finally. I think he's a solid pickup for sure. I don't know what his ownership is, but I think he's worth a waiver, worth a bench spot at the least, just to see how he does.
He's a talented player, and he really scares me for Hollywood Brown's prospects going forward. I think Hollywood Brown is still going to play well, and he's showing his consistency going forward. But it's another receiver being added to this, and Sammy Watkins is going to come off injury. You might not see those 20 to 25-point games going forward from Hollywood Brown. It might be more boom bust like he was doing before. I'm hoping that's not the case because he's really been pulling it out for me, and I was able to get him for $2 in an auction draft. So it should still end up turning out well, I think, and I've gotten good value for him. But for me to win this league anyway, I'm going to need him to keep performing. So going into this insane-ass bye week, he needs to play well for me.
Yeah, and they were great tied with receptions. Each of them got 4. With Bateman only getting 6 yards less than Hollywood Brown. So it will definitely be – I think it definitely hurts his value with Bateman getting more into the mix.
Yep. Also, Baker Mayfield hurt his non-throwing shoulder again, but he is expected to still play this week. He said he's going to still play. So, I mean, nothing much to really think about there going up against the Broncos. He's not really a starting caliber quarterback in fantasy football right now, except in 2 QB formats, and that's really even questionable because there's a lot better options with more upside right now. Besides that, there's really nothing else to say here, I don't think.
Nope.
And in my last little bit of favorite news, before we get to the Dak Prescott news, Michael Thomas is eligible to return from the PUP this week, but they said he's expected to still take a few more weeks to get ready for the season.
Yeah. Those people that drafted him late and have just been sitting him in their IR, just waiting for him to be able to come on. They got to be getting pretty excited, but
I think their anxiety is like sizzling at a high new level, waiting for him to get there. They're like, damn it, I need this guy out here now.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting how he performs with Winston in the backfield. I don't know if he's going to be the explosive player that everyone's used to seeing, but I think he'll definitely be a solid play because of the people that where he was drafted. He was drafted so late.
I didn't end up drafting him, but I still see him as a potential good long-term target because I traded him away. I traded for him for a first-round pick and Thomas for Chris Carson, who I thought was getting a little bit older for Dynasty. So I'm hoping he's got a few good years left in him, and I really do believe he does. I don't know if it'll be in New Orleans in the future, but going forward, he could potentially maybe help you win your fantasy championships going towards the playoffs. But as of right now, he's just not available. So I don't think there's much else to say about that.
No.
And Ryan, would you like to talk about? Go ahead.
I have a couple more injury things.
Sure.
Kadarius Toney, as everyone knows, has had a couple solid weeks. Was questionable all week with an ankle injury, but was cleared to start, and then exited because of the ankle again. I think pretty much in the first quarter. So that's definitely going to be something to monitor.
I agree with that.
T.Y. Hilton made his comeback, had an 80-yard game, but left the game in the second half with a quad injury. And then you also had Paris Campbell also left with a foot injury, which the news I'm hearing, they think that might be a pretty serious injury. So how do you feel about that Colts receiving group if T.Y. Hilton and Paris Campbell are both not 100%?
I don't believe the issue really lies with T.Y. Hilton. He's always been injury riddled, and I think the Colts are prepared for that and were ready to limit his reps even if he came back. I think they're honestly planning to move on from him after the season. It's just the contract that didn't allow them to. As for the work for this team, Paris Campbell wasn't a huge part of this offense yet too. Pittman was really the ascending player in that offense, and there's another wide receiver there too. His name is escaping me right now. It's
Pascal.
Pascal. So I don't really honestly think it'll affect this offense as much. They're going to look to establish a running game, and they'll just have to use those tight ends a little bit more. For fantasy football, this isn't my favorite offense anyway. So going forward, I'm not looking too deep into it. T.Y. Hilton is always a great play against Houston, but besides that, he's done absolutely nothing in years for fantasy football. So I'm not really too concerned for either one of these players.
All right. And then on to the mess that is the Ravens backfield. Murray, Bell, and Freeman all scored a touchdown for the Ravens this past Sunday. But, Murray left with an ankle injury.
Great.
So I almost do you foresee him losing, kind of falling behind Bell and Freeman now that they're kind of just starting to integrate into that offense?
I see this being a three-way splitting headache that no fantasy owner is going to want. Stay away from this backfield. Do not start any of these running backs until one establishes himself and only play them in emergencies. With Murray being hurt, unfortunately, these two other ancient running backs are going to get out there too. Plus, Lamar Jackson's always a rushing QB and part-time running back too. Just stay away from this situation. It's nothing I'd want to be a part of.
And then you had Rashad Penny. He was activated off of IR this week. Mm-hmm. So that's something to keep an eye on with the Alex Collins, Chris Carson, and Rashad Penny situation to see how that impacts. If you have Alex Collins, you don't want to make sure you know who's playing to start for the Seahawks.
Yeah, because his outlooks look significantly lower should Penny get into this game. So definitely keep an eye on it. And then if he does end up playing, maybe look to pivot off Alex Collins, who I think will still be viable and start in that game because Penny's coming off of injury. But obviously he's going to get some targets siphoned from him if that's the case. And I think with that, Ryan, we're ready to get into the – you got even more. Damn, this is a long news segment tonight.
One more.
League segment on steroids.
One more injury thing. So Jerry Jeudy is progressing pretty good. They think he's going to be able to start any week now. I did see a report. They think he's like 50-50 for this upcoming week. But after that, you may see him return. Kind of a bummer for Cortland Sutton owners because he's been having a pretty solid fantasy season. So it'll be interesting how the return of Jerry Jeudy impacts that.
I think that is an interesting concept because this might be the point where you may want to trade Cortland Sutton at his highest point. I do think that this offense can sustain two wide receivers, but when Jerry Jeudy gets back, I think he's going to take over the dominant role as the number one wide receiver, and Sutton's value is going to turn more to a wide receiver two on the low end. That's just a personal opinion of mine. Cortland Sutton could still remain the number one wide receiver in this offense. I just think it's going to end up turning out differently. And whoa, ho, ho, we have someone joining us. There's Ron Seymour. Aren't you supposed to be working?
Potting on the job.
Hello, Ron Seymour.
Does he even know he's in?
No, I don't know, but I'm just going to mute him, so it doesn't matter. All right, Ryan, would you like to move on to the weekly games?
Yes, let's go for it.
All right, so let's do this little drop that Ron probably felt after he was playing me and after he watched his Giants play this weekend. That's also how I feel now that I've got to look at Ron's chin in the bottom of the screen. It's just quite scary. I just don't even know how to feel. He just really wants to stare at us. This is so creepy. All right, Ryan.
It's very uncomfortable.
You feel unsettled? Like you want to end the podcast early? All right, let's talk about this Dallas and New England game. I feel like I've got a supervisor hanging over my shoulder right now. All right, so Ryan, was this CeeDee Lamb's breakout game?
I think so, but then it's also the typical when you face Bill Belichick, he's going to shut down whoever he thinks your main target is, which I think in this game, clearly Amari Cooper was viewed as the main target. They held him to 55 yards, 5 receptions, was trying to open the door for CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz to kind of go off. CeeDee Lamb, that overtime definitely jacked his stats way up. That one, I think it was a 30-yard touchdown, but still he was over a 100-yard game. So definitely a strong showing by him. I don't know if you could plan on that happening on a weekly basis just because of what the Patriots do, but definitely a strong showing by him.
Yeah, no, Damien Harris was definitely a shining star in this game, which coming off last week was not to be expected. And I believe, was it JJ that was able to pick him up off waivers this week? Because I think someone dropped him in our league. So that was a nice, pleasant surprise for him. He got a 100-yard back this week, and he wasn't even being able to expect it to happen. So,
so that was me in my stupidity. I really wanted to get Herbert because I valued him more than Damien Harris just because of some of the performances there and how Bill Belichick runs his backfield. So I dropped Damien Harris for Herbert. But that may be kicking me in the butt later on.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see that. And I was making a bold prediction that Mac Jones was going to be fantasy relevant this week. Not really. 229 yards, 2 touchdowns. It's a very low-end QB2. Going forward, maybe not this year. He's going to be fantasy relevant, but good prospects in Dynasty, just not immediate, I don't believe.
If you're in a situation where if you're in like a 12-man lead and your quarterback's coming up on bye week and you need somebody, he might not be a bad plug and play depending on who else is available on the waiver wire, but definitely wouldn't be the first one that I'm looking at.
Yeah, no, I just don't believe that too. And can we just talk about how Jacoby Myers got screwed out of another touchdown? What is going on with it? Did they not want him to get one?
And I'm biased, but it was an iffy holding call. But yeah, that poor guy. It's insanity.
Yeah, no, it's just been a bad situation for him all around. Is there anything else you want to add to this before we move on to our next game, Ryan?
Dak Prescott just doing his thing. He's been going off. I think put up like 40-something points this week. And the interesting thing too is it frustrated me a lot for a little bit was the Zeke Pollard split, but it appears to be working. Both still had solid fantasy showings, and it's working.
Although I believe Zeke kind of disappointed a little bit this week. You know, you're looking at him being an alpha running back one, and yes, while the split work is still working, he's obviously got a teammate back there. We got a question in here from JT Movin, part of the Heckling fandom. I received Jonathan Taylor, DJ Moore, Naheem Hines, and Gronk, and I gave away Derrick Henry. Godwin, is this a win or a loss? Let's see here and break this apart. So you got Godwin and Derrick Henry. I think this actually might be a win. DJ Moore is really a wide receiver number 1. Jonathan Taylor is really starting to establish himself as a running back 1, and I was kind of moving off that. And you got his handcuff with Naheem Hines here. Honestly, Godwin is, I think, a little bit more spotty, and there's a lot of weapons there with the Bucs. It's not necessarily a bad move either way for either one of you guys, but I really like the consistency that you're getting with these two players that you're getting, especially if more of your other players are more boom bust, you're getting a lot better of a basement with Jonathan Taylor and DJ Moore. I think this is actually a very good move for you, and good job doing this.
Yeah, I think this is one of those trades where you could argue both sides for who gets the win. I think a lot of people just see the name Derrick Henry and think whoever got him won. But like you said, Jonathan Taylor is a strong RB1 this season. DJ Moore's having a great season. Then you got the handcuff with Hines, and Gronk is probably going to go right back to doing his thing when he comes back, whenever that is. And like you said, Godwin's very hit or miss. So I almost see it as trading Derrick Henry and getting John Taylor, DJ Moore, Nyheim Hines, and Gronk. So I think he won this side of the trade.
Yeah, really call this a coin flip. I don't think you really won or lost this, and especially with Gronk as a throw-in, which I didn't even see, this could be a win for you. Good job, I think, moving on. And JT Moving, if you haven't subscribed to the show, do it below for us. Join the Heckling fandom, and if you think we did a damn bad job, go to www.garbagetimeff.com. Scream at us in the voicemails. We'll play them live on the show. So on to our next game, too. So Denver versus the Raiders. Josh Jacobs. Yes, got a lot of carries in this game, but he only averaged 3.3 yards per those carries and got a touchdown. Also got reception. So he's getting a lot of work, but I believe it's very ugly. What are your thoughts on Josh Jacobs going forward, actually considering this game?
Like you said, it's ugly because you have Kenyon Drake in there that was just kind of stealing stuff. I mean, Kenyon Drake, he did only get 4 carries, but he got a touchdown off of that, and then also had a receiving touchdown as well in there. So really, Kenyon Drake had the stronger fantasy football showing as far as points goes. So it's tough. That split backfield is hard, and if you have both of those guys on your team, then kind of good for you, but it's also going to be a coin flip of which one to play week to week.
Speaking of coin flips, Henry Ruggs played good again this week. I don't know what to freaking think of this situation, too, because I've told you I want nothing to do with Henry Ruggs. 3 receptions, 97 yards. What the frig do you make of Henry Ruggs?
It's impossible. It's almost like Tyler Lockett. Like, not as explosive, but kind of a similar situation where you're either going to get 1 point or 20.
Yeah.
Like you just don't know what to do.
Yeah, and throw in the extra touchdown they got with it, too. Who would you rather have right now, Tyler Lockett or Henry Ruggs?
Is this going off of Russell Wilson being out?
Yes.
Henry Ruggs, then I think. I just don't think Gino's going to get it to Lockett.
My God, I thought those words would never come out of anyone's mouth. I'd rather have Henry Ruggs than Tyler Lockett, especially 2 weeks removed. Just funny how fantasy football. Yeah, here we are. Funny how fantasy football just turns things on its head within a week. That's why you want to avoid the injury bug. Also in this game, too, Carr, 341 yards, 2 touchdowns. Pretty decent day. Now, let's talk about the other team that was on this. This 50-50 split between Devontae Williams and Melvin Gordon, who had 53 yards, is absolutely killing both of their values. What the hell do you make of this backfield? I didn't want either one. That's why I traded him away.
Yeah, honestly, I'm not starting either one of these guys. I mean, and they're even splitting receiving work. Like, it's not even like one's the receiving back and one's the rushing back. Like, it's almost completely 50-50. The only players on this team that I'm really looking at are basically Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, and Fant did have a strong showing today, but he's been struggling this season as well.
Yep. And just like you were saying, there's another wide receiver coming back, Jerry Jeudy, who's really the dominant number 1, I think, of this offense too. So, I mean, look for all of these guys to take a hit down when he gets back there, especially Tim Patrick, who's going to be back in a reserve role.
I think Tim Patrick almost becomes irrelevant when Jeudy comes back.
Yeah, and from what we're hearing, it sounds like it might be pretty soon. All right, let's move on from this game and get into another one now, too. The late night game, Seahawks versus Pittsburgh. Can I just say, before we get into the fantasy aspect of it, how happy I am seeing that bullshit that Jamal Adams put up on the screen. They're going right across and giving across the names. And Jamal Adams goes up there, and when you're supposed to say your college, says he's the best safety in all the land in all of football. And then right as he drops back, they throw a pass towards him, and he can't make the interception, and it bounces up in the air. Thank you, Jamal, for not making that interception. Thank you for any players that were playing for the Seahawks, because now the Jets might get a better pick. So, greatest safety in the world. Absolutely.
Well, and I love how it says I'm the best in the world. Then his PFF rank is like 63 out of 85.
Yeah, so excellent linebacker, not an excellent safety. Going forward, is Geno Smith even fantasy relevant here? 23 of 32, 209 yards.
No. Nope.
And as we stated too, Alex Collins got 20 carries in this game, 101 yards and a touchdown. He's a little bit of a puzzle, especially with this backfield in Seattle. They're obviously going to look to run the ball to keep that thing out of Geno Smith's hand, whether they bring in Cam Newton or not, which is just a small rumor at this time. The running game is going to be relevant. But going forward, and as we saw in this, someone's going to be relevant. If Chris Carson comes back, you can forget about Alex Collins. He's going to do absolutely nothing. And if Rashad Penny's there, I think you're going to see a split backfield. So the best situation for Alex Collins going forward, I believe, is just hoping that he's going to be in for another week. Because after that, I think he is almost droppable.
Absolutely. Yep. On to the Steelers side of the football. I think Najee Harris, I think he's going to be a stud. Number 3 ranked running back right now, I think. People that drafted him are going to be very happy. I think the biggest disappointment for fantasy owners this week was the Chase Claypool club.
Boy, was I happy with that.
Yep. Deontay Johnson. And then I would like to point out Pat Freiermuth. Like, he is in Dynasty, he's going to be a good tight end. Eric Ebron is fading more and more to the back. So if Pat Freiermuth's available in your league and you have a tight end that has a bye week later on in the season, I would give him a look.
Yeah, no, that's definitely someone you could definitely look at too. And I want to get back to the Chase Claypool thing. So the reason why I believe you're seeing a lot of inconsistency with him is not because of his talent. He has an immense amount of talent. He's also in that Tyler Lockett kind of role, Henry Ruggs kind of looking player. It's because Ben Roethlisberger, unfortunately, is aged. He's a little bit washed up, and this is probably his last season with that team. Deontay Johnson's more the possession receiver and the wide receiver that helps this offense roll. This offense is going to roll through their young running back and through Deontay Johnson. Claypool is unfortunately going to have a lot more bust games than I think boom games going forward. And like I was very happy Rob made that trade for him because he only needed 11 points to beat me. My shit talking was at an all-time max this week. And thank God Deontay barely scored 3 for him. So thank you. Chase Claypool. So thank you, Chase Claypool.
Yep, absolutely.
Any other thoughts on this game, Ryan?
Not really. I would just like to point out, too, that with the Seahawks starting Geno Smith, I can't believe this game managed to make it into overtime and the Steelers barely squeaked it away. I think that just shows how much the Steelers are struggling as a team. Maybe I'm wrong, but I was very surprised to see this game be as close as it was.
Yeah, no, that's just I think establishes how much Ben Roethlisberger has really fallen off and how Seattle's defense actually kept them in this game because that offense just didn't, outside of Alex Collins, looked like it just couldn't move the ball. And just going forward, I don't believe that a lot of these receivers, especially past DK Metcalf, are going to be viable, especially with Geno running this. And you can just forget about the tight ends. It's just not an offense you're going to want a lot of part of, unfortunately, until Russell Wilson's back. And that's not going to be until later in the year.
Yep.
So with that, let's go across the pond and move to London and talk about a very strange game. All right, Dolphins and Jags. So Myles Gaskins, I think, moved back to being absolutely irrelevant. What do you think?
I think it's awful because he had that one breakout game. So a lot of people that took a chance on Gaskin thought, okay, finally he's back. I'm definitely starting him this week. He's going to be good. And then just does nothing.
I think Solomon Thomas ended up getting more work than him. And don't get me wrong, Solomon Thomas, I think, has actually got a little bit more work in his explosives. And they're giving a little bit more work to other running backs, which are, I'm not even going to mention on the show because they're not nearly as talented and they're not fantasy relevant. So what the frig is going on with that running game? I don't understand what they're looking to do and what they're looking to establish in that backfield. It's not like there's not talent on this team, but it's just not piecing together well. And I don't know what this offense's identity is.
Yeah, don't go near the Miami backfield whatsoever. I do think probably the biggest player that benefits from Tua being back, I think, is Jalen Waddle.
Yeah, he 10 receptions on this game.
Monster game. He's clearly got a great rapport with Tua. So
Yep.
I think Jalen Waddle is probably the main beneficiary. Gesicki had a big game. But aside from those two, and I would say that's it. I mean, do you think Tua is fantasy relevant if he stays healthy?
No, I personally have always think that Tua sucks. I don't like Tua going forward. He might be, I guess, if that Dolphins defense continues to play as bad as it has. It's just amazing how much they've fallen off since last year. It sounded like they were building their team the correct way, and them falling off. Tua might have to score a lot in games, but I just don't have any confidence of them, especially coming off this injury too going forward. They're playing against a very bad Jags defense, and the offense just looked scattered outside of Jalen Waddle, to be honest. On the other side of the ball here too, it's nice to find out that, Mr. Grinded Up, Urban Meyer, has figured out that he's got a top 5 running back there with James Robinson, who got 17 carries and 3 receptions. I love James Robinson going forward, and I really think he's going to remain a top 6 or 7 running back in this league.
Yep, and I'm stupid for trading him away. Great.
Thank you.
Draft. I think we could both confidently say we did not see this coming. But yeah, that's awesome. Aside from James Robinson, I don't think I want any of these players. Marvin Jones did have a big game.
He did.
I just don't think you can depend on that.
Marvin Jones had 100 yards in this game, which got me a little bit nervous. Like I said, I was playing Ron, and he happened to be the first player that popped off for him. I'm like, oh, shit, I'm going to actually have to worry about this week. Going forward, I don't believe it'll be consistency, but I think Marvin Jones you could probably play as your flex or your wide receiver 3. There's nothing wrong with that, and he's honestly probably the default number 1 option for Trevor Lawrence, but you want them to be playing bad defenses or against teams with good offenses going around. Teams that run the ball, I don't believe Lawrence is going to be spreading the ball around a lot, and they'll be looking to get the ball to James Robinson. So, look at those matchups week to week, and Marvin Jones might be valuable to you. And unfortunately, Dan Arnold failed to impress after I thought he was going to have a decent week. So I'm moving off Dan Arnold for now. Potentially still a dynasty player down the road, a bench spot, but not impressive. So, Ryan, what happened in this Vikings and Panthers game?
That I don't even know because I didn't see it, but what a game.
Well, let me tell you here.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to start talking about players, but you give a game recap.
Yeah, sure. I'll give you a game recap. So, Adam Thielen, got out of the retirement home, decided he had 11 receptions for 126 yards, and I just had a question for you about him. Is it time to sell high on him after coming off this game?
I say yes, and I'm actually so mad at myself because I have him on one of my teams and I benched him, and now I'm going to lose by like 5 points, which is awful. But I would say yes, sell high on Adam Thielen. I don't foresee this being a common occurrence. The Vikings were actually playing very well against a pretty solid defense. I was surprised to see that. Dalvin Cook got going. Adam Thielen was going. Even Justin Jefferson had a solid game.
KJ Osborne came back to life. He's the one that actually won them the game in overtime.
So I don't know what happened, but they took it to a defense that was pretty solid. So it's going to be interesting to see if Carolina maintains that status of being a good defense as the season goes on, because as we know, those first 3 games were against pretty fluff opponents. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. I hope Dalvin Cook stays healthy and maintains, as I have him in one of my leads. So that'll be definitely something else to keep an eye on. And it also just points out that Alexander Madison has 0 value if Dalvin Cook is healthy. Yeah,
but he is definitely someone you want to handcuff to him because Dalvin Cook, 100%. As you have shown, is someone that's going to be viable to miss games, especially 1 or 2 during the season, just because he runs so hard. Dalvin Cook is the engine that makes this offense go. It makes these wide receivers work because teams have the game plan around Dalvin Cook's explosiveness because he takes the ball, he catches it out of the backfield, and he's explosive. That's what allowed Kirk Cousins to get the ball to all of his wide receivers this week. So KJ Osborne reemerged too. I don't really know if he's worth picking off of waiver wires again because, like I said, he had a good week in week 1. decent week in week 2 and then disappeared for 3 weeks after that. And here he is again. You're going to have to pick your games where you think he's going to actually be viable. Should Thielen go down at age 31? He's going to be very viable, I think, especially if Dalvin Cook is in this offense. But should Dalvin Cook go out of these games, I don't think you're going to see 3 wide receivers be viable in this offense. So look at the injuries here. Look at the matchups. And look at teams that are susceptible to slot wide receivers, which KJ Osborne is, if you're looking to pick him up. I just don't believe in the hype yet, which I bought into early in the season.
Yeah, and I mean, if this game doesn't make it to overtime, I mean, Osborne has almost no fantasy value. It was that late touchdown to win the game that kind of pushed him into fantasy relevancy, you know?
Yep, and speaking of fantasy relevance too, Cooper Hubbard is showing that he is fantasy relevant as a number 1 running back there for the Panthers. He looked pretty good.
Yep.
DJ Moore is still by far a wide receiver 1 for this offense, which was I don't want to say refreshing because Sam Darnold was not refreshing, but it makes you feel good about his value going forward because Sam Darnold looked like shit in this game. What happened to him?
Yeah, he did not look as good as he has so far. I mean, Vikings still have a decent defense, so I'm not super worried, but definitely looked like he was struggling a little bit. So just something to keep an eye on in the upcoming weeks, kind of see how he does.
Yeah. All right. With that, we'll move on to the next game now. So we're on to the Chargers and Ravens, and this is one I'm going to eat a lot of crow on because in my DraftKings, I stacked a lot of Chargers receivers thinking this was going to be a very high-scoring game. Well, it was a very high-scoring game for one team and not the other one, and that was the Chargers. Here's the thing, though. I don't honestly believe this is something that's going to amount to you having to worry about the Chargers. I believe this is just they got outmuscled in this game. They came across country from west to east and got dominated by a team, I think, that just beat them in the trenches, and Mike Williams was hurt. I think they just got outmuscled and bullied in this game. Going forward, I think when they're going up against flashier teams and flashier opponents, they'll still play well. They played a team in the Browns that were also tough in the trenches and played well against them. I just honestly believe it was a weird week for them. So what is your outlook for this game? Do you think that they're just coming back down to earth in what they really are, or do you think it was just a weird week for them?
I agree with you. I think it was just a weird week. To hold Justin Herbert to only 195 yards, to hold Eckler to only, the whole offense they got less than 30 yards rushing. The whole offense.
They stopped him. They punched him right in the mouth in the running game, and the Chargers couldn't adapt.
I don't think you're going to see that happen again. I think I think this is going to be a huge learning experience for them. But I think it's going to be the outlier this season. I don't think you're going to foresee this happen again.
Yeah, as you stated, Keenan Allen had 50 yards, the possession receiver. Mike Williams injured a little bit, 2 yards, and Eckler had 48 yards passing. So they completely stopped this offense, and I think the Ravens showed the formula on how to do it. But it's got to be the right matchup, I think, against the Chargers to really stop them. I still believe in them going forward. For Lamar having a weird passing game, he still had a fantastic week fantasy football because of that rushing ability. Mark Andrews also still on the move at tight end too. I believe he's really viably the tight end number 3 right now because Raiders tight end, give me the name, Darren Waller. Has been inconsistent right now, so I believe that moves Mark Andrews up to the wide receiver 3 on the season. In most people's mind, maybe not statistically. Oh, you think he's 2 right now, huh?
I'm looking at Fantasy Pros right now. So you have Mark Andrews is oops, that's in standard. Let me switch to PPR real quick. So as this doesn't count week 6, which will probably even boost him. Mark Andrews is number 2. Travis Kelce is obviously number 1. But then I think the most surprising for me is Dawson Knox at number 3, Dalton Schultz at number 4, and then you got Waller and Hawkinson right after.
Yeah, so you're kind of getting that blob effect right now where you have Travis Kelce, Andrews, and then everyone else.
Yep.
And surprisingly, Kittle's not in there, but that's also because Kittle has been playing in a very weird Kyle Shanahan offense this year and is now hurt. So we'll see how that goes going forward. Anyway, back to this game. Hollywood Brown didn't do much, like we said. He ended up splitting work there with the Ravens rookie. And had 4 receptions. I think he's still going to be viable going forward, but like I said, I do have concern here. Don't know if I'm going to try to package him away for something, but like I said, this is concerning.
Yeah, totally agree.
And stay away from that Ravens running game. Anyway, moving on to our next game, too. All right, Ron, we're finally into the game you really wanted us to talk about, which is how bad your fucking Giants are. So, Rams and Giants. We're going to give you a little bit of a break because a lot of your team is hurt, but you were absolutely dominated in this game. Stafford had 4 touchdowns. Henderson went for 78 yards and a touchdown. Cooper Kupp, 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. Woods didn't even have that good of a game and still had a touchdown. And Higbee, a little bit of a disappointment, but there's a lot of weapons on this Rams offense, 36 yards. So they absolutely dominated the Giants from start of this game to finish.
Yeah, and Henderson also got a receiving touchdown in there. So anybody that had Henderson, that managed to get Henderson on their team, is very happy with what's going on. I think going forward, I mean, with the history of Achilles injuries, you might see Henderson might just be the guy now. Next year, the year after that. I mean, it's definitely possible. And I also think going back to earlier things when Sony Michel got there, they thought, oh, this is going to hurt Henderson's value. And clearly that's not the case.
Yeah, and something else that kind of came interesting out of this, even with how bad the Giants played, going forward, I think that Daniel Jones is still going to be viable. He's just playing a very, very hard defense. Is the return to Sterling Shepard, who had 10 receptions in this game and had 76 yards. So obviously he trusts him there, and that may be a little bit of a problem considering what happened to Tony and with that injury he has going forward. So this is a muddled wide receiving core right now, especially with all the injuries there.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel Jones, other than Sterling Shepard, didn't really have much else to throw to. But I think also you're just seeing Daniel Jones return back to earth. I mean, I know how excited Ron was because Daniel Jones was, what was he, like a top 5 quarterback?
Yeah.
Up until, and now I think you're going to kind of see him level out and he's going to go back to what we typically see. It'll be interesting to see if that picks up when Kadarius Toney is completely healthy and when Slayton is healthy. But I don't know. It's nervous, especially for people that maybe picked up Daniel Jones in fantasy.
Yeah.
So it'll be definitely something to watch going forward. I mean, 240 yards and 3 interceptions. That's
brutal.
Not good for anybody.
Yeah, no, that's definitely not even viable football and something you want to watch too. Also in this game too, I understand Devontae Booker had a rough go of it against this Rams defense, but he got a lot of carries. I think he's still going to be viable going forward, especially against the defenses he's got coming up against him. As long as Saquon's out. But like I said, that's as long as Saquon's out, and it might only be another week or two. So if he's not starting next week, I think Devontae Booker is still viable, but he hit the buzzsaw of a Rams defense, and that seems to happen to a lot of running backs that go up against the Rams. So, keep an eye on him.
And it just goes to show that not every backup running back is Alex Madison, where you get to plug them in and they just pick up right where the RB1 left off. Booker is not Saquon. He's not going to put up the numbers that Saquon does behind that offensive line.
Yeah. But there is certain running backs that are like a Khalil Herbert, which we'll get into in a little bit.
Yep.
But anyway, in our next game too, let's cover this puke fest. Colts and Texans. On the Texans side of the ball here, Mark Ingram had 18 carries for a miserable 73 yards, showing you that they can just not push the pockets on any defenses. Cooks had 89 yards. I don't like anyone on this offense. I would try to avoid anyone, even Cooks. It's so miserable watching General Mills run this offense. On the adverse of this, though, Jonathan Taylor, fantastic game, 14 carries, 145 yards, 2 touchdowns. He has had 2 fantastic weeks in a row. He's also getting passing work. T.Y. Hilton, or as the fantasy footballers call him, T.Y. Houston, came back, 4 catches, 80 yards. Paris Campbell had a touchdown, Pittman 35 yards. But as you said, this whole wide receiving core is now banged up as a result of this game. And going forward, it's going to be difficult outside of Pittman.
Yeah, and I will say, too, Jonathan Taylor had me nervous. I think the whole first half he only had 2 carries. I don't know what they were doing. But then he ripped off that 83-yard run, and that's pretty much what saved his fantasy day. He got the 83-yard run, and then he got the touchdown after that.
Yep.
He did end up getting a second touchdown, but that first half was rough. But it will be interesting to see how much they rely on him with the wide receiver core banged up. And I still think he's a very viable RB1 that you could depend on week to week.
Yeah. All right. So now on to our next game now, too. This was a very interesting one. Not as an end result of the scoring, but of the players that might come out of it. Chiefs and Washington football team. 397 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions by Patrick Mahomes. So Patrick Mahomes was Patrick Mahomes, as we stated. Darrell Williams, 2 touchdowns. Kelsey, 99 yards. Tyreek, 76 yards and a touchdown. So it's a typical Chiefs game against any team where they just dominated across the board on the offense. Interesting to note, Josh Gordon didn't even touch the field. Where was he?
Yeah. I have no idea.
Taylor Heineke, I thought had the potential of having a good game, but he was kind of meh out there. I mean, not fantastic. I still think he's viable in 2 quarterback leagues. Also, potentially as a flex if your quarterback's on bye, so potentially look like him until Fitzpatrick's back. He may actually still win the job even when Fitzpatrick's back. He hasn't looked horrible, but this week it was just not that impressive. Antonio Gibson is now hurt, so as we said, J.D. McKissic going forward because he gets the rushing and passing work and is the only viable running back in this backfield is your number 1 pickup if he's available. And as Ryan stated, he is available in 50% of your leagues, so see if he's on your waivers and put in the claim for him if you're in desperate need of a running back. Ron was not a big fan of him this offseason, but Ron, guess what? You saw he's viable. Pick him up, and if he's on your bench, congratulations. You have a number 1 running back at least for a few weeks until we know what this injury is there.
I actually think Ron did pick him up, so that makes it even more hilarious.
He did. He played him against me.
And I think the most surprising thing for me in this game was the fact that the Washington Redskins, the Washington football team, I didn't say that, hung with the Chiefs for the first half, and then after that it was all KC.
Yeah, they kind of do that with the Bills too. They kind of hang for a half, and they just don't have enough ammunition to stick with them.
Yep, they can't maintain that pace. But everything else, I totally agree with. You covered it well.
All right, so we'll move on to our next game. So we got to talk about JJ's team here, right? So I think you have something in that 6th-round pick, Khalil Herbert, man. I mean, 19 carries, 97 yards, and a touchdown. 2 receptions, too. He shows that he can handle the workload. Obviously, the Bears did what they did against the Packers, which is lose. Aaron Rodgers always seems to beat them. But the interesting note on that Packers offense is that Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon continue to split carries there. They were actually both pretty good this week. So what are your thoughts on the running back situations of both the Packers and the Bears?
So for the Packers, them splitting carries hurts. Luckily, Aaron Jones's day was saved by the 4 receptions for 34 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah.
Don't know if you're going to see that kind of receiving work to him on a weekly basis. Mm-hmm. So I don't really trust either one of these guys as one of my starting running backs. But if you have them, you probably are going to have to play them.
Good.
As far as the Bears go, I picked up Khalil Herbert. I loved how he played. I'm most interested to see what happens when Williams comes back off of the COVID list. Does he take back that number 2 role, or did Herbert secure it? But when it comes to the Bears and their coaching staff, I literally have no freaking idea what they're going to do.
Yeah, I think the best outcome for your team especially would be that he remain on that list. Not that I'm wishing COVID on anyone, but hopefully maybe they'll just rest him for another week for your sake. So he doesn't have COVID, but they'll just rest him so he's ready so Williams is ready after. But as long as the Bears starting running back is out, if he is back, you might see more of a split backfield considering the work that Khalil Herbert has earned based on what he did that week too. So JJ, you might have another viable running back and another piece for that offense. Congratulations, as we stated. Aaron Rodgers, not highly fantasy relevant, but he wins games. So there is that.
And Aaron Rodgers did get he had a 3 touchdown day, got a rushing touchdown and 2 passing touchdowns, so that helped out his fantasy a little bit.
So Justin top 12 Fields, as always, but
Justin Fields a very pedestrian outing. 16 completions for 174 yards, a touchdown and an interception, and I think he almost had another. Some of his throws did not look good.
It makes Allen Robinson not viable, and this is the first time in his entire career that I can say that. Allen Robinson has played with some bad quarterbacks in his past. Not that the Bears' rookie starting QB is. He's simply a rookie, but just this does not look good for Robinson's outlook going forward.
Agreed.
And as for Mooney, boom bust. He had a okay week. We started him in our Megalo Bowl league, and he did okay for us. But like I said, he is boom bust, and you have to look at the options going forward for him. And Cole Kmet, I don't believe is viable going forward.
Nope.
All right, so moving on to the next game, JJ may have something to say about that, but tomorrow or Thursday, but we will see. Bengals and Lions. Burrow ripped them apart for 3 touchdowns, 271 yards. Mixon looks like he wasn't even hurt anymore. He had 18 carries for 90. Yeah, I know, right? 94 yards, 5 receptions. Jamar Chase looks like the rookie of the year right now. 4 receptions for 97 yards. The rushing game for the Bengals looks okay, but the amount of carries that Joe Mixon got helped him. And just the other side of the ball, the Lions really did absolutely nothing. That offense looked horrible. The only saving grace for this Lions offense for fantasy football was that TJ Hawkinson recovered from last week's injury and had 8 receptions for 74 yards, establishing that he is the only true option for this offense outside of their running backs.
Yeah, I will say the Lions can take solace in knowing that they didn't lose by a game-ending field goal.
Mm-hmm.
They had lost it way before then. I also think one of my biggest takeaways is: are you concerned about the value of T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd going forward? The number of yards that Joe Burrow threw for, and they still only got 44 receptions, 44 yards, and 7 yards out of 300 and out of 271.
I really don't like Tyler Boyd going forward. T. Higgins is the kind of player that's going to get you somewhere between 10 to 13 points a week, making him somewhere around the round of a wide receiver 3. The floor is not horrible for him, but there is really not much of a ceiling. He's kind of living in the basement, and that's where he's staying. He's that weird cousin of yours that lives down there and never comes upstairs except for food. So wide receiver number 3, nothing else besides that. As for Tyler Boyd, I just don't have any confidence in him. I don't know what your thought on these guys are, but that's my take on them.
I totally agree. And I know that a lot of people may have been high on Uzomah after that one big game he had. He did manage to get a touchdown in this game as well, but I don't think he's really going to be a fantasy relevant tight end.
No, but Uzomah does this every year, as Ron and JJ have stated too. He looks good in 1 or 2 games. You pick him up, and then he does nothing for you. So just a flash in the pan is normal. Move on from that. You have a lot better options. Maybe Pat Freiermuth going into the future, as Ryan stated. All right, so let's move on to our last game of the night, the Cardinals and Browns. Kyler Murray looks like league MVP, competing with that spot for Josh Allen, who is also going tonight. 20 for 30, 229 yards, 4 touchdowns. James Conner is a bastard who keeps stealing work away from Chase Edmonds, who had Conner had 16 carries for 76 yards, which is a horrible per carry average. Yet Chase Edmonds has 4 carries for 46 yards. So, yeah, we're just not going to give it to the guy that gets 12 yards a carry. Instead, we're just going to let the guy that bull rushes for 3.3 yards a carry get the ball. That made absolutely no sense. AJ Green did okay. Kirk did okay. Hopkins did okay and did the touchdown. As again, they're spreading the ball all around this field. You don't know who's going to perform for these wide receivers. So spin the wheel of fate and decide which one you want to play that week. They might do okay. They might not.
Hopkins is probably the only trustworthy one on a week-to-week basis.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else, no thanks. And like
I would say no thanks, but unfortunately we're hitting the bipocalypse where you might not have a choice, and one of the good offenses still playing this week is the Cardinals, so you might just have to play one of them.
Might have to pick up and pray.
So Ryan, you said no thanks. Going forward, which one of these 3 do you trust the most? Between
Green, Kirk, and Hopkins?
No, Hopkins is out of the situation. We know him as the number 1 wide receiver out of Rondell Moore, Kirk, and Green. And you can throw Ertz into that now.
That's another. Yeah, we got to cover that too. And I think I'm going to say Kirk. I think I trust Christian Kirk the most.
Yeah, at least
Very
this week,
tentatively. I'm very hesitant to say that.
it's
But
still very tentatively because it feels like all these guys could have nothing but 50 yards and no touchdowns this week because he's trying to make a lot of people happy, and the only way you do that is by spreading the ball around a lot, and that does not help your fantasy football team going forward. Yeah, so going forward, how is Ertz going to affect this offense?
I think it boosts his value a lot. I mean, he's going to be way more. He's going to be worth a lot more now on this team than he was ever going to be on the Eagles.
I think you muted yourself.
Did I?
Yeah, go ahead and say
you
that
hear
again.
me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
I think Ertz's value goes way up just because now on this Cardinals defense, his value is going to be way higher than it was ever going to be on the Eagles.
Mhm.
I think the biggest impact, though, is going to be what it takes away from the receiving group. Will probably be the biggest thing to take away to see what happens.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying there. And on the other side of this offense, Kareem Hunt is hurt. As we stated, Nick Chubb is expected to still be out for a few more weeks. So this running game is really going to be a question, which we will talk about in the waiver show tomorrow. I do not believe in the Donovan People-Jones hype, who had 101 yards and 2 touchdowns. This wide receiving core outside of Odell as a wide receiver 3/flex is really not viable right now. And Jarvis Landry is going to be coming back, who is more solid than any wide receiver on this core. So honestly, I don't really like any pieces of this wide receiving core. As we stated, Kareem Hunt being hurt, Baker Mayfield is injured. It just might be a rough patch for the Browns going forward. What are your thoughts on the Browns offense?
Yeah, and even Odell, like you said, he left the game for a couple plays, I think, too. I mean, he's still kind of banged up. So I don't know how his health is going to be week to week. Jarvis Landry, like you said, he's coming back. He's probably going to be the only one that I trust just because he has kind of that slot work. But that would be it. Njoku, I know, had that big game where he put up like 20-something points. Flash in the pan. Don't expect it to happen again.
Yeah, I mean, Donovan Peoples-Jones did that this week, so.
Yeah, don't. I mean, because, yeah, go ahead and pick up Peoples-Jones, but when are you ever going to feel comfortable putting him in a starting spot?
He will never touch my starting lineup this year.
He's going to be someone that just sits on your bench, so.
I mean, maybe a dynasty spot if you'd like to put him there, but I honestly don't even think you need to put him there. Who knows? Maybe it'll be Felton next week. You honestly just don't know with this offense. This is an offense that looks to establish a run and play strong defense, which is a formula that works for them. But if they win games the next few weeks, it's going to be because they're ugly defensive struggles. I don't like Baker Mayfield going forward, and I don't like a lot of the options going forward here. The only ones that I'm modestly interested in right now are the running backs that might be on waivers this week.
Agreed.
And with that, Ryan, I believe we have covered all the games except this Monday Night Football game that we are going to be watching very shortly here. So do you have any closing thoughts or thoughts on the game tonight?
It's just going to be your usual suspects. Tannehill, Allen, Derrick Henry, Dawson Knox. I'm very interested to see if he keeps this going.
Mm-hmm.
And I was surprised to see that Stephon Diggs only has like 1 touchdown this season.
Yeah, no, he's having a very weird year, and it's because Emmanuel Sanders is playing so well, I think, and Dawson Knox has emerged. They're spreading the ball around a little bit more there, and they actually have a running game, which none of us expected.
Yeah, that just blows my mind. Like, you could not have convinced me that heading into week 6 that Stephon Diggs would be ranked wide receiver 25.
Yeah, no, it's unbelievable. I think going forward, he's still going to have a very good season, and I have no doubts he's still going to finish as a top 10 wide receiver in this league. So maybe not in the spot you drafted him, especially being on the back end of the wide receivers, but I think he's still in for a good year, and that Bills offense is incredible. So moving forward, still live with confidence with him. And like I said before, guys, you can find us at www.garbagetimeff.com. Leave voicemails for us there, especially for waiver questions. We'll answer them live on the show tomorrow. We'd love to hear from you guys. Or, leave hate mail like Christian does every single week. It seems to work for him. He seems to get his jollies off about it. So go ahead and do that too if you'd like to do that. Also, you can find us on Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Tune in, lots of places. Anywhere you have podcasts, feel free to tune in, and we'll see which one of the hosts actually show up tomorrow. I might be here, Ryan might be here, JJ or Ron might be here. You never know which one of us you're going to get, so you'll get different opinions on every single show. And feel free to talk shit about the ones that aren't there, too, because we do anyway. Ryan, you guys going to have a Garbage Time Presents the MMA podcast this week?
Yeah, so we missed last week. Some stuff came up. Casey wasn't able to do it, but we will be back this upcoming week. We have a solid fight night card this week. Then we have 2 back-to-back pay-per-views to finish out the month of October and bring us into November. So 3 amazing weeks of MMA coming up.
So as Ryan said, it's time to win some money in UFC. And with that, like this video, subscribe at the bottom, visit us and leave reviews wherever you find us, and join the heckling fandom. All right, guys. Good night.